Nos vemos, May. Bueno, pues vamos a dar inicio, Lupita, a nuestras conferencias. Ya tenemos la primera invitada. ¿Qué tal? Muy interesante la conferencia que nos va a platicar el día de hoy. Bueno, los que se están conectando, sean bienvenidos al DevFest. Y bueno, vamos a presentarles a nuestra primer ponente que nos va a dar una charla. Es un gusto presentarles a Madona Wambua. El tema del que ella va a hablar el día de hoy es Simplified App Navigation with Android Jetpack Compose Navigation. Y permítanme leerles un poquito acerca de ella, de los trabajos de ella. Bueno, Madona es fundadora y directora de tecnología de Hibu Labs, es conferencista, es ingeniera senior de Android y es experta en desarrollo de Google para Android. Tiene más de una década de experiencia en la creación de aplicaciones de Android. También es embajadora del Women Tech Maker, anfitriona de Tech Talks con Madona. Desarrolladora a la que le gusta compartir sus conocimientos de Android. Eso nos da muchísimo gusto. Y les gusta enseñar a otros cómo crear aplicaciones de Android. Y bueno, el día de hoy nos va a acompañar con esta charla, ¿sí? Madona, ¿nos escuchas? Hi, Madona.
Hola. Hello, hola. I'm so excited to be here today.
No, please welcome. It's good. It's great to see you here. Pues Madona, vamos a darle la bienvenida para que sin más preámbulo continuemos. Please welcome Madona. Welcome to the fest. We are so happy and glad to have you here.
I'm so glad too. And in fact, I was talking to my friend. She's in Mexico, and I was telling her, you know what? I need to come to Mexico. She was like, yes, you have to come.
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow is too soon. So I'm traveling to California. I'll be giving a keynote there, but tomorrow is too soon. But definitely next year, I'm looking forward to coming there.
I'm waiting for you next year, okay?
Okay, let me know when we are ready and then I can just get started.
Muy bien.
Perfect. Thank you so much for the great introduction. I'm just going to share my screen and then walk us through the presentation. Let me see. Share screen. Share. Let me see. I need to share this one here. Let me know. Okay. Oh, there. Pretty cool. I mean, I think it's straightforward. I can see the screen is on. I just want to click a little bit and just make sure we can move to the next slide. Perfect. So hello, everybody. Thank you so much for the great introduction. My name is Madona Wambua. I am also a GD Android, and today we'll be talking about simplified app navigation with Android Jetpack Compose. Now, be prepared to take these slides after and also go build a simple navigation today if you've not ventured into the Jetpack Compose navigation or even try Jetpack Compose. So what we're going to do is that we're going to walk through a simple application where we will create a bottom nav, where we will see how we can navigate in one screen, another screen, and another screen. We're going to have 4 items. And then based on that, we'll be able to click on those items. We'll not display a lot there, but you can definitely continue that code later on and just see how that works. Now, the main purpose of this talk is just to show you how easy it is these days to just build using navigation. And also throughout the talk, I'll talk about other navigation and also showcase a little bit of pseudocode on what you can use in Jetpack Compose in the new modern Android world, because hey, we are living in the modern world, and what a better way to build better application for the modern world. Okay, let's start the presentation. Now, as I just mentioned before, we're going to be talking about navigation in Jetpack Compose. Now, the most important thing for you to know is that navigation, for people who don't know, because I always like to make my talks more introductory in the beginning, just to explain what it's about, because sometimes people don't know what you're talking about, and it's good to just bring them into the topic pretty easily. Now, navigation, it's all about guiding the user through your app seamlessly, right? Everybody in the world have a device, I believe, and that device definitely has navigation. So navigation is very, very vital to our application. And as developers, we need to make sure that it's seamless and pretty nice and easy, because if I get frustrated in any application with navigation, I always quit or uninstall my application. You don't want that to happen. Now, in the past, Android navigation involved fragmented transaction activities, switching, and complex backstack management. Now, if you've been building Android from back in the days, I started building Android around 2013, 2014. So if you build it during this time, you know very well there was no defined way of doing navigation. And I like to tell this funny story where I had an application that was called Simple Math. And in my application, I had a couple of, I had few activities. So the way I navigated was from activity one, go to activity B. From activity B, go to activity C. From activity C. And now when I think about it, I'm like, how did I handle the backstack? Clearly, I did not. You not get the answer. So the way I assumed is that everybody that's moving from activity one, they'll move back using the system backs button. Now, that's also part of navigation. So these days, there's a better way to implement that in Jetpack Compose, and we'll see how Jetpack Compose makes it even easier to just handle the backstack entries. Now, so these methods, the ones that I've mentioned, were had a lot of limitation and were error prone because let's say I move back and then my screen was frozen. What happens? I have to kill the app because otherwise I will not be able to navigate back. And also sometimes something that I noticed that would happen is that when I would hit the back button, the system back button, and by the system I mean when you have your phone, that system back button over here, what would happen is that it would exit the app itself, and I don't feel like that's a good experience for users because you lose your users when you do that. So you want to ensure that you keep your navigation back, forward, very seamless and free of error prone. I know I put a 404 because I'm like, oh, it's a lot of errors, screaming errors. Okay, now I wanted to showcase a little bit, and I did this because I know most of us might be still using legacy code, and that's okay. Many applications still use legacy code, but the new recommendation is you can build upon your application in Jetpack Compose, or you can advance your applications just using the new methods. That is just make if I mean I normally say if you have bandwidth, it's okay for you to take that 10% time and rebuild your application just slowly in a feature branch. But if you don't have that time, just continue implementing upon what you have using Jetpack Compose. And I know at the end you'll feel like I'm trying to convince you to use Jetpack Compose, but I'm going to share why I think it's important and why I think moving into the new Android way is even better because I've seen it myself. Now, here you'll see a code. And for many of us here, if you're new, you will notice a pattern that if you've not used this before, you'll notice that this is what we used to use. If you've not seen it before, I'm just summarizing that this is what it looked like. So we had this particular function that would override, which was all navigation items selected, where we passed a menu item. And in the menu item, that's where you defined the items that will be in your menu. If you think about it, that lived in the XML folders where we'd have a menu and then that menu would have an icon and all that stuff. So many bunches of code. And then here, if you notice that I have something that's called is on stack, which is set to false. The idea was ensure that you keep track of this stack so that when we go back, we're not crashing back. We are going back safely. So that's what we used to do. So for instance, if you had feeds, you would do that feeds fragment. If you had another fragment, you would do another fragment, and like that. And that was so tedious and a lot. Now, let's see what Jetpack Compose brings in now that you've seen how it used to be before. Number one, Jetpack Compose definitely is a game changer. And again, it's not about the UI component, it also brings navigation to the modern age. That is making navigation easier and seamless. I know I've mentioned seamless now a couple of times, but so true. Now, Jetpack Compose also navigation brings all the benefits of the navigation component library because I think that's what we started using once we had these good patterns like the MVVM patterns. We also advanced our navigation. And I'm not saying get rid of your current navigation, no, but just see how you can definitely integrate what you have now, even in other screens. And then it simplifies navigation and handles complex routing, which is something that we all face. Because sometimes other applications might be very complex, and you want to make sure that you navigate the right way to go back to your step. Like moving back, let's say you have a screen that has more than 4 actions, you have to make sure that you go back the actions in the right way. Now, before that, I'm just going to talk about a little bit, like I mentioned, I like my talks to have like a nice introductory before we even do the coding or just look through the code, because I think it's very important to just understand the common types of navigation. And this is what my slide will be doing. For an example here, you can see we have the explicit intent, implicit intent, navigation components. Now, the implicit intent, that is navigate from one activity to another within an Android app. We know that. That's the same thing I was talking about. You remember in the beginning, activity, we're ahead. Activity one, go to activity B, go to activity, like that. That's an explicit intent. Now, an implicit intent, and I feel like this is also asked a lot in interview questions. So I hope that's kind of like it's going to be easier for people to remember like what explicit intent is, just activity one, go to activity B, activity C, like that. That's explicit intent. Now, implicit intent, it's a request from another app component without specifying the target component. This is, for instance, opening a web, right? That's called an implicit intent. That's a good example that you can always give if you ask that in an interview. Now, we have the navigation component library, which is provided by the Android Jetpack, that simplifies navigation between different destinations in your app, such as fragments and activity. And we've seen that, especially when we have, let's say, if you have your navigation graph, you can easily say from action this, go to action that, which is pretty nice way of also doing navigation in Android. Now, we have a popular one, which I think many applications use, which is what we'll be looking at, which is the example we'll be looking into today. And that is the bottom navigation view, which is navigation between, let's say, primary destination within your app. Like, for instance, we'll be looking at my popular application called Budgeting Buddy. You can get it on the Play Store. It's called Budgeting Buddy by Madona. And the idea is I have 4 destinations, but they're all in the bottom navigation and you are able to see what's happening in those. Now, we also have the drawer navigation. I feel like these days, not so many people use the drawer navigation when you think about it, but the drawer navigation was like, the way Twitter has for instance, Twitter has this thing when you can flip and see your profile on one side instead of having it live in the bottom navigation. You can have that drawer to see it. Now, we have the tab layout. All these are navigation used to create tab interface because you can navigate in that tabbed kind of feel. So that's navigation. You have to ensure that's handled well too, because you're navigating from that, going to that section, and then again, that going back to that section. And then finally, I added a few more examples here just for everybody doesn't know about this, but this is just a fragment manager. You can dynamically add or repress or remove fragments within activity. And then we have the view pager. I think many of us here, if you've never heard about the view pager, you can look into it. And that's a UI component that allows users to swipe left or right to navigate between different fragments. So you see, when you have a view pager, you just view the page and then you're able to like navigate, just swipe, and then you can move back. And that comes well when you're doing like an onboarding process. And then finally, we have the toolbar or action bar. This is also navigation. I know many people don't think that's navigation, but it is. When you put that back arrow there, that's navigation. You're telling this, move back to this screen, or go back to this screen, or exit this screen when we put an X. And yeah, so let's get to the juicy part. So we'll be walking now through the bottom navigation, which is what I mentioned I'll be giving an example on. And again, as I've mentioned, these codes that I'm going to share today, you can build your app pretty easy. So I'm going to walk us through this code because I'm going to summarize especially what's happening in this code. So this code defines a sealed class destination with 4 specific destinations represented as a singleton object inside the class, as you can see. Now, the first line defines a sealed class. As you can see there, we say sealed class destination, which has 3 properties, right? Which is number 1, we have the route. And I like this because we've created a destination. It's like we are going somewhere, like in a trip, like my next trip to Mexico. That's my destination. And then I can design the route. Now, we have the route, which has 3. So we have the route, we have the icon. So the icon is to give a description of what is that. And we'll see that when I keep explaining. And then we have the title. The title is just to tell this is what is happening, or this is why we are calling this thing. Now, in Kotlin, a sealed class are used for several purposes. I like to mention this because I think it's important, and it's mainly to create a restricted class hierarchy that is useful for a variety of reasons. Number 1, it can be less limited inheritance, grouping related types, or even pattern matching. That's when you'll need to use the sealed class. Now, Inside the destination class, there are four objects. You see the object that I've created. The object, let's say, transaction, object budget, object tasks, and object settings. Now, these are the four destinations that we have in my home screen. Like when you open the application, you'll see these four navigations, and they are object. And if you notice, the object are essentially singletons instances of the destination class. If you notice there, that's what I've done. That object transaction is just a singleton of that destination because it's just pulling back that destination and just saying, the route is called transaction, the icon is transaction, and the title is transaction. And as you can see there. Now, because this is a list, we will definitely need to create something, and we can access, mostly in Kotlin, we access this through a companion object if you want to access the toList. And you see what toList does is basically what this companion block is doing. It defines a static property called toList, which is a list containing all the defined destination. And as you see there, we have transaction, budget, tasks, and settings. And this allows you to easily access and iterate through all the available destinations in your code pretty easily. And we will see that when I continue explaining. Now, the juicy part, let's start connecting the dots. Now, before we do that though, you'll notice that I've created a composable function called the app screen. What am I doing here? I have the nav controller, which is part of an Android navigation component library and is used for managing navigation within the app. I remember I explained this in the beginning. Now, I also use something called scaffold, which is a composable function used to create, let's say, basic app layout structures. And it typically just includes an app bar, bottom app bar, or any other UI elements commonly found in your app. It's so amazing that they've made it so much easier that you just call this scaffold and you do all these things in one. So I'm just giving you a tip here. If you want to use, if your app needs an app bar, you know, the app bar where you can write the title of your application, scaffold it is, and then you can define the app bar, or you can define the bottom app bar. It's so amazing. Now, however, in our case, as you can see, it's being used to create a layout within the bottom navigation bar. Now, the bottom bar, as you can see there, where I call it the bottom bar, inside the scaffold, the bottom bar parameter, we set it to a bottom navigation bar. See that bottom navigation bar? And this is where the bottom navigation bar is defined. And it takes two parameters. Number one, the nav controller. And this is the navigation controller that the bottom navigation bar will use to handle navigation between different destinations of the screen. Now, the app items, this is the list of destination object likely representing different screens of destination in the app. And it's passed to the bottom navigation bar to define the items of the bottom navigation app bar. Now, we have something called the content. If you notice right there, where I set the content parameter, where I set that the lambda, and then I have a box in it. Let me explain what is happening here. So within that, the parameter is used to define the main content of the scaffold, you know, the scaffold thing that we talked about in the beginning. And in this case, it's a composable function that takes a padding parameter which represent the padding applied to this content, because definitely we need to pad. Now, inside the content, you see we have a box, and the box has a modifier. So the way I think of modifiers, they're just like decorators, because you can pass a lot in the modifiers. And one thing that I like to do, especially when I'm coding, is I always click just to check. This is so amazing in Jetpack Compose. Like you can just click that particular box and see what the box takes, and then you can just build it based on what it takes. It's so cool. Now, inside the box, there's the app navigation, which is responsible for handling the navigation and displaying different screens. So this app screen is what you're going to call in your main Compose theme in the on create when you're creating this app. So just trying to give you tips on how you can build this, but definitely you can build this and run it and you'll see what will happen. Now let's go and look at our bottom navigation bar. If you notice, that's what we had there, bottom navigation bar, which is a composable function too. So let's look at that. Let's look at how we build that. Perfect. Now, this is where the juicy part is happening. And this is the beautiful code I like to, I love looking at Compose. I don't know about you, but it makes me feel better when I look at it. It's clean code. Now, here as you can see, and it's also purely written in Java. Sorry, not Java. I hate Java. It's written in Kotlin, so it's super cool. Now, here as you can see, we have something called the function bottom navigation bar. again, which takes in the nav controller and the app item, which is a list of our destination. I'm going to talk a little bit about the val that I create here that's called the backstack entry. Remember when I showed you in the beginning how we used to handle the is on stack? Now, this is how we handle backstack entry in Jetpack Compose. Now, so you see that line that says nav backstack entry by nav controller dot current backstack entry as state. So this line obtains the current backstack state and entry using the current backstack entry as state extension function of the nav controller. Now, the backstack entry represent the current destination in the navigation. Let's talk about what the current route actually does. So this line extracts the current route destination from the backtrack entry if available. It will be used to determine which item in the bottom navigation bar is currently selected. And then finally, in our app items dot for each, because you notice there we're looping through the objects in there. What we're doing, this loop iterates over the destination object, which is our app items, to create each item in the bottom navigation bar. I hope I did not talk that. I know that was too mouthy, but just basically trying to explain what this code is doing. And then you see there we set the label, which we give it a text, and then we pass in the item.title, and then we set the set selected content color, which is how it will look when it's selected. And then we have unselected. When it's unselected, you see that's what the color will be. And then we have that option where we're saying always show label to be true, means always let the labels be displayed. You can also choose to hide that if you don't want to show the labels. And then finally, we have to set that boolean when selected equals to that. We point it to the route. Like if you've selected settings, please go to the route of settings. Now, we have the final thing, which is the on click, but let's look at that. So on the on click, what we do is that we specify the action to take when the item is clicked. Now, it uses the nav controller.navigate method to navigate to the corresponding routes, and it provides additional navigation configuration options. So here, as you can see, we say launch single top equals true, and then we restore state true, and that's it. Like we've handled all our navigation. Now, I know this, I'm going to be a little bit mouthy and just complete this other section, which is let's look at now the app navigation itself. Remember that composable function? Let's look at that. So when now you start calling these particular screens that we created, these are the objects, right? Remember the transactions, budget, task, and settings. This is how you're going to pass it. As you see there, we have the composable function where we pass the destination, the transaction, the route, and then we say start from transaction. And if you notice in the nav host, we always start from the home, and home is transaction here. And then now we can move to budget, we can move to task, and we can move to settings. And voila, this is what you'll have. And that's how it will look like when you click on it. You will be able to see those transactions. And one thing I like to mention is that I do not implement the transaction in this particular presentation, but you can definitely implement those composable functions pretty easily, but just maybe calling them at composable and then passing maybe, you can do pretty something easy. You can just pass a text, or which is what I've done. I just pass a text saying this is that and and that's it. Now that you're done looking into looking into bottom navigation, I would recommend everybody, if you want to look into this, please feel free to get the slides and go build that simple app, that simple navigation. And you'll notice that it's going to be the same way if you build, let's say, an application that has a complex navigation. That is, for instance, you have an entire screen that's navigating to other different screens. Sometimes I feel like, I know, don't quote me on this, but I know sometimes our UI people, they like for us 100 people to have things that look like iOS, but most of the time we try to be rebellious, but it doesn't never work anyway. So they put those arrows showing that this is how you navigate. So we have to handle that. I know it's a joke that I didn't want to make, but I know it's true. Anyway, so here as you can see, I'm trying to show you how you can create, let's say, a more complex navigation where we have a nav route which has a path, and then as you can see there, we have the currency, we have the rate, we have the overview carousel, just overviewing things, and you can see there you can also pass arguments pretty easily, and also inside that object you can create an object that has another navigation in it, made super easy, and you will handle it just similarly the same way I would do on the other one. Now, once you want to be able to work with that navigation, this is just pure pseudocode. You will again do this where you will have the currency, nav rate, and nav back. And you also have to do then navigate back, and then you should be able to just call the currency when you want, nav rate when you want. This is just rating, and then you want to change the currency in the application. And then you can do this based on, let's say, the item. When the item clicked, you can listen to that and tell it, hey, these are the action I want you to take. And then there, as you can see, I give another example of how to handle the backstack. And in fact, if you want to use your view model too, here you can use a view model. And if you want to display anything, definitely you can do that to display using the back button too. Now, that option where I saw the currency option is just showcasing how you can use the lambda to get whatever you want to get and make it work. And I know I will not do any justice if I don't showcase or talk about how we handle complex navigation and also in DSL. And here, this is again just our simple pseudocode, as you can see there. You will definitely, and this is actually pulled from the, what is it called, the developers.android.com. You can log into that, and that's how you'd be able to handle that. And finally, let's talk about deep linking. So deep linking, as we all know, it allows you to direct users to a specific location or content within your app directly from an external source, such as a web URL, notification, or any other app. So by just bypassing the home screen, because you're just clicking and then going all the way to the app. Now, how does deep linking actually work in Jetpack Compose? So there's different types of deep links. First, as you can see there, we have the explicit and also implicit deep links. And here's a cool pseudocode that I showcase on this. So when you get time too, you can look into this. But that's just, you definitely have to define that in your data from your manifest. No, yeah, I think it's the manifest. Yeah, I've not touched the manifest in a while, but yes. And then here you will definitely pass data between screens like this. You will do the details.item ID, and then when you're also working with conditional navigation, you would do this. So if you're checking, conditional navigation is just the way I'm just calling conditional. You would check if it's logged in, navigate this dashboard, else navigate here. So pretty easy. And you can handle this pretty easily also on, like in Jetpack Compose, it's pretty easy to handle this. And then we have other advanced navigation flows for complex app handling. And this is because I know many applications are very complex, and some people decide to build navigation to fit their own apps. So I always like to mention that based on that, it might not fit the application. That's why I'm using pseudocode here. And as you can see in these pseudocodes, I showcase one complex navigation that we have that I'm trying to navigate to. And that's just an example of how I would create it in Jetpack Compose. And then let's talk about advantages. So advantages of navigation is just simplified navigation setup, safe arguments, and deep linking support, which is so cool, and I love that. Now, handling the backstack, again, the backstack entry keeps track, automatic handling of backstack when operating Jetpack Compose, and now developers can even customize the backstack behavior when necessary, and I love this so much because it's way much easier than before. Because I think the way I used to struggle when I would try to navigate. And then finally, uh, I like to end my talks with this, that it's always a continuous learning. There's so much to learn in Jetpack Compose. There's so much to learn in Android. There's so much to learn generally in everything. So be always open to the learning mindset, and you got this. Here are the resources, and I also talk about that in my book, which is out already. You can order it on it's called Modern Android 13 Development Cookbook. The link, I think the team can share the link with anybody that's gets, and you can connect with me here on LinkedIn. And yes, thank you so much. Are you there?
Hola, hola. Estamos aquí de nuevo. Thank you, Madonna. Any questions? Yeah, here. Number one. And currently, what percentage of applications are using Jetpack?
That's a very good question. I'm going to be honest. I don't know the current percentage of application using Jetpack, but I've seen a lot of push from Google, and I've seen many companies use Jetpack Compose. And I would say mainly when you go to the developers.android.com, they talk about the applications, they talk about the companies that have adopted Jetpack Compose. And I would say, trust me, every companies right now every company that I've worked with for the last like 3 years, most of, I mean, I've not worked with many, but our company is using Jetpack Compose. My previous company also used Jetpack Compose. But I'm gonna say I know based on the fact that I've been connected to the community that people are really trying to implement on this. However, I feel like the worldwide adoption is not yet as big as compared to the way the US is being pushed to do that, and other parts, because I spoken in DroidCon, and I think many people are using Jetpack Compose for experimental purposes and also for just building. But I have to say it's very stable because I'm using it. We're using it in production, and it's fun. I love doing Jetpack Compose. And did you see how it was easy just to build the bottom navigation bar? And you can. Something else I like to mention is that I feel like for once I can flex when I'm writing code because I'm like I know what I'm writing. Like I just move fast. I like before, and I'm like, how do you write this in XML? And then I have to go Google. Right now, I don't have to Google anymore, and I feel like that's fun.
Yeah, so fun. Thank you, Madonna. The next question. What is the best road to learn Android?
Yes, so the best route to learn Android is to just stick to the community. Number one, the community is very great. I've been part of the Android community and I've learned so much, but also use the code labs that Google offers. They're very, very good. And also get my book. I talk about Jetpack Compose and also an introductory level to get you started in Android. So, yeah. And if you experience any issue, you know me now. You're like, Madonna, I was in your talk. I need you to help me. How can I get this one? But generally, I would just say, find how you learn best. Is it books? Is it tutorials? Is it with the community? And learn with the community, learn with the books, or learn with the tutorials. And yeah.
Yeah, thank you. The next question is, in your experience, which is the better, Java or Kotlin? Java.
I this is so controversial, and this is why. I did Java for most of my career. By the way, I was using Java because I think, and I used Java for the longest, 5 years, 6 years. And then they had to tell me that, hey, you have to start using Kotlin because now Android does not use Java anymore. Because every company right now does not use, I mean, many companies that I know, we still have legacy Java, but we don't use Java anymore. We use Kotlin. And to me, I really felt sad because I felt like my years of experience were being taken back. Like, you're taking away my 7 almost years of experience in Java to now tell me to start using Kotlin. But I had no option because I mean, it's either do that or move to something else. So I decided to learn Kotlin. Now, I have to admit, I feel like when Java advanced is when Kotlin came. And then we didn't get to use the Java advanced version, but Java is so good now. I'm like, oh my God, Java is so good. But Kotlin is also so good. So I feel like here they're going to tie. That's my answer. They're going to tie. But I would go with Kotlin any day for Android. And this is why. It's much easier now to build with Jetpack Compose because think about it. Jetpack Compose is pure Kotlin. So you just build with Kotlin and then you are also enhancing your knowledge of Kotlin. So I love that. The other thing I like to mention is that, hey, in software, we are always learning and we will always change the languages. So always be open. That is something I had to learn the hard way because I was like, my 7 years of experience are going away. Oh, I couldn't interview. I was like, I can't even interview in Kotlin because I don't understand Kotlin yet. I can't interview with Java because now I want to forget Java. But I love it now. I love it.
I love it too. Okay, another question. Is there any other type of mobile programming language we can develop this type of navigation?
Uh, that's a very good question. I think it depends with what you're building. Because if you build a mobile application, you'll definitely use either Jetpack Compose or just the other navigation. So I would say, I think currently this is the only way you can use, and definitely you're going to use this for Jetpack Compose because that's why I was showing how Jetpack Compose is much easier to use. And then the other one is if you're using Java, definitely you cannot use Java in Jetpack Compose because the language is Kotlin, so it's not going to be interpolable, so you cannot use them. So only Android and Jetpack Compose, I would say.
Okay.
Yeah.
The next question: which is better, to boot Android or direct with Jet?
That's a good one. Okay, which one is better? I think Jetpack is good because when you think about it, Jetpack Compose, you build cleaner apps. And trust me, I don't know the percentage, but I know for a fact that when you run Jetpack Compose in your app, when you're building Jetpack Compose, the app is very fast and it's unbelievable. It's very fast. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much, Madonna. It it was a great experience, and now we love Jetpack Compose. Thank you so much for being here. We are waiting for you the next year.
Yes.
I promise you will be here in Mexico. So we are glad to have you here. And thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you so much too. And let me know where I can also share this with my community too if it's available.